My son-in-law believed he walked out of my house that Saturday evening with $1.8 million in signed investment transfer documents. He had no idea I had swapped every single page in that folder before he ever sat down at my dining room table. By the time he reached the end of my driveway, my attorney was stepping out of her car, parked 2 houses down, and 2 federal investigators from the Financial Crimes Division were right behind her. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from and whether you think financial betrayal from family cuts deeper than any other kind. Because what I experienced that November evening taught me something I will carry for the rest of my life. I am 66 years old. I spent 38 years building a construction company with my own hands, my father's advice, and more sleepless nights than I can accurately count. Mitchell & Sons Construction started in my garage with 1 beat-up truck and a second-hand backhoe. By the time I sold it, we employed 140 people across 4 states and carried a reputation that had taken decades to earn and would have taken only one bad decision to destroy. I understood that. Everything I built carefully. My wife Carol stood beside me through every single one of those years. She managed the books when we couldn't afford a proper accountant, drove materials to job sites when I was short-handed, raised 2 extraordinary children while I was working 70-hour weeks chasing a dream we had built together on a kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and more optimism than sense. She was the kind of woman who made everything she touched better, including me. Carol passed 18 months ago, pancreatic cancer, 6 weeks from diagnosis to the end. I won't pretend I have fully processed that loss. What I will say is that grief has a way of clarifying your priorities with brutal efficiency. When the fog of those first terrible months began to lift, I found myself sitting at the same kitchen table where Carol and I had made every major decision of our lives together, and I knew with the certainty of someone who has run out of patience for delay exactly what I wanted to do with whatever time and resources I had remaining. I called both my children to that table on a Sunday afternoon in September. My son Daniel, 38, had become an electrician and built his own small contracting business, working hard and asking for nothing. My daughter, Claire, 34, was a teacher who had the best of her mother in her patient, perceptive, genuinely good. I made the dark roast Carol always made for important family conversations, and I laid everything out plainly. The sale of the company had finalized at $1.8 million. 20% would cover my retirement needs and provide modest inheritances for each of them. The remaining 60%, just over $1 million, would establish the Carol Mitchell Children's Learning Foundation, funding tutoring programs and school supplies for under-resourced kids in our county. It was a dream Carol had carried for the last decade of her life. I intended to honor it. Daniel set down his mug and looked at me with a kind of quiet respect that made me feel like I had done something right as a father. He said it sounded exactly like her and that he thought it was the right thing to do. My son-in-law said nothing for a long, careful moment. He sat beside Claire with his hand over hers, his expression shaped into something that resembled deep admiration. Then he said that what I was doing was one of the most genuinely generous things he had ever heard of. His voice was warm and easy, the voice of a man who had spent years practicing how to sound like someone you could trust. I should have read that more carefully. I had spent 4 decades in a business where people regularly tried to take what wasn't theirs, contractors who overbilled, partners who skimmed, clients who disputed legitimate invoices with fabricated complaints. I knew the language of predatory behavior. But grief, I have since learned, softens the instincts that protect you. It leaves you wanting to believe in the people who are present when your world has come apart. I heard what I wanted to hear. My son-in-law had been part of my life for 3 years. He married Claire in a small ceremony on my back lawn the same week Carol's roses along the fence were in full bloom. He was a financial planner, polished, articulate, impeccably dressed, with an effortless laugh and a particular gift for making people feel understood. From the moment the company's sale negotiations began, he had quietly positioned himself as my trusted financial advisor, offering to review documents, suggesting investment strategies, asking precisely calibrated questions that established him as an informed and caring presence in my corner. What I did not yet understand was what he was actually building. 3 weeks after that kitchen conversation, I was upstairs looking for my reading glasses when I heard his voice coming from the guest room balcony. He had stepped outside during what I assumed was a routine call, believing the noise of dinner preparation downstairs would be sufficient cover. It covered him from the kitchen, It did not cover him from the hallway where I was standing. I stopped moving entirely. He was speaking in a tone I had never once heard from him. Across 3 years of Sunday dinners and holiday gatherings, low, efficient, businesslike in the way that has nothing to do with service and everything to do with transaction. He used my name, but not as my son-in-law used it at the table. He called me the old man. He said 1.8. He used the phrase annuity transfer protocol. And then he mentioned a company name I recognized immediately because my accountant had forwarded a financial fraud advisory to my inbox 6 days earlier. Meridian Capital Assurance. The subject line of that email had included the words Elder Financial Exploitation Scheme currently under federal surveillance. I stood in that hallway, and I listened without breathing for nearly 3 minutes, while my son-in-law discussed moving my retirement savings into an account structured to give him effective control over the assets. He described a transfer timeline. He described the documents he intended to have me sign, noting that the language was designed to read as a routine annuity rollover to anyone who didn't examine the fine print with specific knowledge of how the scheme operated. He mentioned that the reversal window would be essentially closed once I signed, and then he made a sound brief, satisfied, quiet, and said, "Yeah, well, he trusts me." I walked back to my bedroom. I sat on the edge of the bed Carol and I had shared for 31 years, and I let the full weight of what I had just heard settle into place. My daughter's husband, the man who had held my arm at the graveside, the man who called me Robert like we were old friends and had sat at my kitchen table that September afternoon with an expression of sincere admiration on his face. He had apparently decided that a recently widowed 66-year-old man represented an opportunity. What he had not accounted for was the man he was dealing with. I had built a company across nearly 4 decades by understanding, at a fundamental level, when someone was trying to take something that didn't belong to them. That instinct does not retire when you sell the business. It sharpens when someone you have welcomed into your family turns it against you. I did not confront him that evening. I cleared my face, went downstairs, and ate pot roast at my own table while he talked about football standings and home maintenance as though he had spent the last 3 minutes discussing the weather. Monday morning at 8 o'clock, I was in the office of my attorney, Patricia Reyes, a woman who had handled my business contracts for 22 years and who I trusted more than almost anyone alive. She was meticulous, direct, and constitutionally resistant to alarm. I told her everything I had heard. She listened without interrupting once. When I finished, she said, "I have a contact at the Federal Financial Crimes Unit who will want to hear this," and picked up her phone before I had a chance to respond. The 2 weeks that followed required a discipline I had not previously been called upon to exercise. Patricia confirmed through her federal contact that Meridian Capital was already under active surveillance. My son-in-law was not a minor figure in the operation. He was a regional facilitator who had been identifying and cultivating targets for over 2 years, recently widowed individuals, recently retired individuals, people experiencing the specific combination of grief and financial transition that made them vulnerable to a trusted voice offering to simplify the complexity. There had been other victims. The investigators were very interested in formalizing my case as part of a broader prosecution. My role was uncomplicated in its outline and demanding in its execution. I was to continue behaving as though I had noticed nothing. I was to remain warm, cooperative, and apparently grateful for my son-in-law's financial guidance. Every Sunday dinner during those 2 weeks required me to sit across from him and respond to his charm with the easy openness he expected. I watched him work the table, asking Daniel thoughtful questions about the electrical business, helping Claire clear dishes without being asked, squeezing my shoulder when he left and telling me not to worry about the paperwork, that he had everything handled. The performance was extraordinary. If I had not been in that hallway, I would never have found the seam in it. Patricia had prepared a complete set of void documents. They were visually identical to the fraudulent transfer package, same formatting, same structure, same paper stock, but they transferred nothing, authorized nothing, and were legally inert. She placed them in a manila folder. I placed that folder in my study, on the left side of my desk, beneath a Sports Illustrated I had positioned specifically so I would know immediately if anything in that drawer had been disturbed. He called on a Thursday, smooth and warm, to say he had finished the estate planning documents and wanted to go over everything together that Saturday. He suggested dinner at my house. He said he and Claire would bring dessert. He said these were complex documents and he wanted to walk through each page carefully so I understood exactly what I was signing. I told him Saturday sounded perfect. The day arrived overcast and cool. The kind of late November afternoon that settles heavy and gray over Virginia and makes the bare oak trees look like pencil sketches against a slate sky. Claire arrived first, carrying a peach cobbler that smelled like her mother used to make it. She hugged me at the door and said she was glad things were getting sorted out and that her husband had worked hard on the documents and she thought it would take a lot off my plate. I held her a moment longer than usual before I let her go. My son-in-law came in behind her carrying a leather portfolio case and a bottle of Cabernet, clapping me on the shoulder with the easy familiarity of a man who had made a long career out of looking at home in other people's living rooms. He set his portfolio on the dining room table with a deliberateness that looked casual but wasn't. Daniel arrived 20 minutes later. I had called him the previous day, framed it as wanting a second set of eyes on some paperwork, which was accurate. Daniel had distrusted his brother-in-law for the better part of a year without being able to articulate exactly why. He said he'd be there. My son-in-law's smile adjusted slightly when Daniel walked through the door. Barely perceptible, the micro-recalculation of a man accounting for an unexpected variable. He recovered within a breath, extended his hand, said it was great to have the whole family together. But I had seen it. We ate first. Roast chicken, the peach cobbler, conversation about the maple tree in the backyard and whether it needed to come down before the first hard freeze. My son-in-law was relaxed and engaged, pouring wine, asking Daniel about a recent job, reminiscing about a camping trip he and Claire had taken the previous summer. He was very good. I had always known he was good. I had simply not previously understood what he was good at. After the dishes were cleared, he opened the leather portfolio with practiced confidence and spread the documents across the table. He had a remarkable ability to translate deliberately opaque financial language into something that sounded straightforward and sensible. I had once considered this a genuine skill. Now I understood that the simplicity was engineered specifically to prevent the kind of scrutiny that would expose the underlying structure. He walked me through each section with patience and apparent transparency, answering questions before I asked them, managing the pace of information in a way designed to create confidence without encouraging close reading. He indicated where my signature would go on the final pages. I picked up the pen. I set it back down. "These are a lot of pages," I said. "You know how I am with fine print. Would you mind if I took these into my study and read through them myself? I've always been slow with the details." Something crossed his face, a half-second of recalculation, quickly resolved. "Of course. Take as long as you need." I picked up the portfolio and carried it to my study. I had approximately 5 minutes before the pause would begin to seem unusual. I opened his folder on the right side of my desk. I opened Patricia's folder on the left. I transferred every page, every tab, every carefully assembled document. His authentic fraudulent transfer package moved into my desk drawer, and Patricia's void instruments moved into his leather portfolio, which I closed and straightened on my desk. I stood there for a moment. Carol's photograph was on the bookshelf, the one from the summer garden, her squinting into the afternoon sun, laughing at something I had said that I can no longer remember. I looked at her for a few seconds. Then I picked up the portfolio and walked back to the dining room. "All clear," I said, settling into my chair. "Exactly what you described." The relief that moved through him was small but unmistakable, the contained exhale of a man whose plan is proceeding precisely on schedule. He indicated the signature lines. I signed every page with steady hands. Daniel watched with the careful neutrality of someone waiting to understand the shape of something he cannot yet see clearly. My son-in-law collected the portfolio with a movement that was fractionally too quick before returning to his easy warmth. He told me I would sleep better now, with the financial plan settled. He said the estate structure was solid and I had made good decisions. He reached across the table and gripped my forearm in what was meant to feel like affection. I looked at him and said, "I want to make sure those documents accomplish exactly what you intend them to." Something shifted behind his eyes. He smiled. "I'm confident they will do exactly what's needed." "I am too," I said, "one way or another." He didn't catch the distinction. He began gathering his coat. "Before you go," I said, and my voice came out calm and level in the way it used to come out in boardrooms when a deal was about to turn, "I think you should know that I was standing in the hallway outside the guest room 3 weeks ago. I heard your phone call." The dining room stopped. My daughter turned toward me. Daniel put down his coffee cup. And my son-in-law, this careful, professional, patient man who had spent 3 years building something inside my family's trust, went the particular color of someone who has just felt the floor shift beneath them. "I heard you discuss the Meridian Capital scheme," I said. "I heard the transfer timeline. I heard you describe the documents you planned to have me sign. And I heard you call me the old man and say that I trusted you." He began to say my name. "The documents you just put in that portfolio are void instruments," I said. "They were prepared by my attorney 2 weeks ago. Your original documents, the real ones, are in my desk drawer. My attorney has been working with federal financial crimes investigators since the Monday after that phone call." My daughter said his name, just his name, the way you say a name when you are asking someone to tell you it isn't true. He turned to her, and I watched him reach for the charm one last time, the way a person reaches for something in the dark and finds the shelf empty. He began a sentence about stress and misunderstanding and what grief does to a person's perception. Daniel stood up. "Dad," he said, "do you want me to get the door?" Headlights swept across the dining room window. Patricia's car, followed by the sedan I had been expecting since I sent a 2-word text from my study while swapping those documents 40 minutes earlier. My son-in-law watched the headlights and seemed to understand, in the particular silence that followed, that the thing he had built was over. My daughter was very still. She was looking at the leather portfolio on the table as though it had become something unrecognizable while she wasn't watching. She said, quietly, "How long have you been planning this?" He didn't answer. "How long have you been sitting at his table?" she said, and her voice had found an edge I had not heard from her before. "Taking care of him, making him feel like family, and planning to take everything?" He made a decision in that moment that told me more about him than 3 years of Sunday dinners had. He said, "You have no idea the kind of financial pressure I've been carrying. That money was sitting there. Your father was going to give it all away anyway." "Stop." Her voice was flat and final. "Don't explain this to me like it's something I should understand." Patricia came through the front door with the measured composure of someone who has done this before. The investigators came in behind her. The room reorganized itself around the new reality of what the evening had become. The legal process that followed moved with the deliberate thoroughness of federal financial crimes prosecutions. The Meridian Capital investigation had been building across multiple states. My son-in-law was one of 11 regional facilitators identified in the operation. The charges included wire fraud, elder financial exploitation, and conspiracy. He was not the first in his family to face federal prosecution, which explained certain things about the ease with which he had learned to present himself as trustworthy. He did not come home from that Saturday evening. Claire filed for divorce inside of a week. She told me she had been quietly registering things that didn't fit for the better part of a year. Unexplained financial stress, late nights he attributed to client calls, a coldness she had mistaken for professional pressure. She said that what hurt most wasn't the deception directed at her. It was watching him sit in her father's house, week after week, eating her father's food, accepting her father's warmth, while he was planning to take the one tangible thing her mother had left behind. She is her mother's daughter. She is doing the work of rebuilding herself with a steadiness that makes me proud, in a way I struggle to put into words. The Carol Mitchell Children's Learning Foundation launched the following spring. Our first grant cycle funded tutoring programs and school supply libraries for 412 children across the county. I attended the open house at one of the participating elementary schools and sat in the back of the cafeteria watching volunteer tutors help kids with math homework at folding tables decorated with paper sunflowers. I thought about Carol, how she would have been in the middle of that room within 5 minutes, knowing every child's name, asking every tutor about their own lives. I thought about how close it had all come to being redirected into someone else's account and disappearing. I keep her photograph on the bookshelf in my study. Some evenings, when the house is quiet, I tell her about the day. I tell her the foundation is doing what she always believed it could. I tell her the children are all right. What I want you to take from this story is not the drama of the document swap or the moment the investigators walk through the door. What I want you to take from it is this. The people who target the vulnerable do not look the way we expect predators to look. They look like family. They sound like concern. They build trust over months and years precisely because that trust is the mechanism of the theft. They count on grief softening your instincts. They count on loneliness making you grateful for their presence. They count on your desire to believe that the people your family chose are worthy of that choice. I was fortunate. 38 years of business had given me instincts that refused to go quiet even when my heart was broken. My son-in-law made one phone call on the wrong balcony at the wrong moment, and I had a woman's photograph on my shelf every morning reminding me what was worth protecting and why. If you are older, if you have recently lost someone, if you are navigating the financial complexity that comes with retirement or inheritance or the sale of something you spent your life building, please keep both eyes open. Trust the voice that tells you when something doesn't fit, even when every surface impression tells you it does. The people who love you tell you the truth even when it costs them. The people who are using you tell you exactly what you need to hear. That is the whole difference. And it is worth knowing. If this story connected with something in your experience, I would be grateful if you shared your thoughts in the comments. Tell me where you are watching from today. And if you have ever had to protect something you built from someone you trusted, I would like to hear about it. Subscribe to the channel and stay with us. There are more stories like this one, and every single one of them is worth telling.